Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Rules Committee met and reported a rule, House Resolution 629, providing for consideration of H.R. 1815, the Security Exchange Commission Disclosure Effectiveness Testing Act. The rule provides for consideration of the legislation under a structured rule. It provides 1 hour of debate equally divided, controlled by the chair and ranking member of the Committee on Financial Services. It self-executes a manager's amendment that makes technical changes. It also makes in order 4 amendments, 2 Democratic and 2 Republican. The rule also provides for consideration of H.R. 3624, the Outsourcing Accountability Act, under a structured rule. It provides 1 hour of debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking member of the Committee on Financial Services. Finally, it makes in order 2 Republican amendments to H.R. 3624. Mr. Speaker, the bills before us this week are consumer protection bills. Together, these bills make an effort to give everyday Americans access to clear, digestible information that will help them make informed investment decisions. Mr. Speaker, the inequality in this country is at a historic level. The experience right now is on par with the Great Depression, the Gilded Age. And without adjustments like the ones proposed in these bills, it can only get worse. The most visible indicator of wealth inequality in America today may be the Forbes magazine list of the nation's 400 richest Americans. In 2018, the 3 men at the top of this list, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, Microsoft founder Bill Gates, and investor Warren Buffett, held combined fortunes worth more than the total wealth of the poorest half of Americans. 3 men had more wealth than 160 million Americans. In 1989, the bottom 90% of the U.S. population held 33% of all wealth. By 2016, the bottom 90% of the population held only 23% of wealth. The wealth share of the top 1% increased from about 30% to approximately 40% over the same period of time. The tax bill just passed by the House the last session doubles down on this troubling trend. In 2019, a person in the bottom 10% gets a $50 tax cut, and a person in the top 1% gets a $34,000 tax cut. At the same time, millions of poor and middle-class people are expected to see their taxes either stay the same or actually increase in the long run. Before us today, the Outsourcing Accountability Act makes one simple but meaningful change to existing reporting requirements. It would add a requirement for publicly traded companies to annually report foreign and domestic employment statistics to the SEC. Are your employees working in the United States, or are they working overseas? By publicly reporting this data that already is collected, companies are providing important information to their investors, consumers, and American workers, with no additional burden on their business. As Heather Slavkin-Corzo of the AFL-CIO said recently, quotes, "What gets measured gets paid attention to by a company," and I would add their investors, end quotes. As a former union member and a current member of the House Committee on Education and Labor, I think we in Congress should do everything we can to incentivize companies to invest in American workers and not to offshore their work. This administration has done everything in its power, in my view, to give corporations even more power at the expense of their employees. And these effects are being felt in households across this country. Mr. Speaker, the other bill before us is the Security Exchange Commission Disclosure Effectiveness Testing Act. All we are asking for in this bill is to make sure that the data we are collecting for consumers is easy to understand so it can be used in the way it was intended. Field testing allows average investors to pilot a form that the SEC is planning to use and to be a focus group on whether it's user-friendly and the results are understandable. A recent form that was field tested revealed that everyday Americans were deeply confused, quote, about the information the form was supposed to be communicating. In this specific instance, we are talking about how a company discloses any conflicts of interest it may have in providing investment advice. Close to 7 million people in my home state of California and 55 million people nationwide, most of them low and middle income, don't have access to retirement benefits at work. We're talking at people who work for small businesses, whose companies just cannot afford the expensive financial products on the market. In stark contrast, the financial sector takes around 25% of all corporate profits in the United States, represents 7% of the U.S. economy, and creates a mere 4% of jobs. Mr. Speaker, this bill makes it easier for people who are trying to build a secure retirement for themselves and their families to understand the investment advice they are receiving and whether it's in their best interest. We have an obligation to our workers who sacrifice and provide so much for our country to give them something in return. These two bills, taken together, help put consumers in the driver's seat. One requires information already collected by companies to be shared, and the other makes sure that consumers understand the information they are being given. The only people who should be opposed in these bills are big businesses who may be afraid of what the public will learn about their practices. The goal should be to give every American worker a secure retirement and protect consumers. Why wouldn't we want to take every step to get there? Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.